Are plant-based milks really a better option? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to review different plant-based milks and we'll discuss whether or not they are a better option than traditional cow's milk. I'm also going to help you learn how to pick the right one based on your own unique needs. Now, as an FYI, this video is not sponsored. All of my other videos aren't sponsored either, so I don't really have any agenda behind this video, but just to provide you with the information as it is. My goal is just to really help you make the best decision for yourself. But first, hi, my name is Katey. I'm a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer. My goal with this channel is to help you learn more about nutrition, fitness, and wellness so that you can be your best, whatever that looks like. I also love to do product reviews, so if you have any products or topics that you want me to cover, just let me know in the comments below. And let's get started. What are plant-based milks? Plant-based milks are dairy alternatives that, obviously based on its name, don't come from animals. In a lot of cases, the goals of plant-based milks are to be similar to traditional cow's milk, but they may vary in their nutrition, their functional properties, as well as their taste. Now, there are so many different plant-based milks on the market, so what I'm going to do with this video is I'm going to talk about the main ones. So this includes things like almond milk, soy milk, oat milk, and cashew milk. Now, of course, there are so many different companies that do make plant-based milks, and so all of their ingredients are going to vary a little bit, as well as the functional properties of them and their nutritional composition. But in a nutshell, the way they make plant-based milks is relatively the same. So basically what they do, let's say they are making almond milk. So they take the main ingredient, which is almonds, and they soak them. Then they grind them up and add a ton of water. Once they've mixed this together, then they will put it through a filter to filter out any of the solid substances so that you're just left with the liquid. At this point, this is where companies will vary. Some companies will add additional ingredients like gums and emulsifiers to improve the functional properties of it. They may also add sugar and flavorings to enhance the flavor. And some companies decide they don't want to do that. So of course, it is important to look on the ingredient list because there will be slight differences because of these different factors. Okay, so now let's do some comparisons in terms of nutrition. When it comes to nutrition, plant-based milks are very different from one another, and they are definitely different than cow's milk. Now, because most people use plant-based milks as an alternative to cow's milk, what I will be doing for this video is comparing the nutritional composition of each individual plant-based milk and then comparing it to the nutritional properties of cow's milk. I'm also going to include sweetened and unsweetened varieties because a lot of people do opt for the sweetened plant-based milks, but just to be fair in terms of the sugar content, I do want to make sure that I compare unsweetened versions to cow's milk as well, so that we're not just saying, oh, it's high in sugar. So first, let's talk about soy milk. Soy milk has been around for a very long time, and obviously it is made out of soybeans. Compared to all of the plant-based milks out there, soy milk is the only one that is similar in protein content compared to cow's milk. Generally speaking, it can vary a little bit, but the average cup of soy milk has about 7 to 8 grams of protein, and the average cup of cow's milk has about 8 to 9 grams of protein. So very, very similar. So now let's take a look at an example of soy milk. I'm going to use Silk as a common company because I do find a lot of people do drink Silk products, but I will use other examples as well. And this label here is the label for the original Silk soy milk. So it is a sweetened variety. If we take a look at the nutrition label, we see that it has 8 grams of protein per cup, which is awesome. We also see that it has mostly unsaturated fats, which makes sense since it's a plant-based beverage. And we see that it has 6 grams of sugar, of which 5 are added sugars. If we take a look at the ingredient list, we obviously see that soybeans are going to be the first ingredient, and this makes sense since it's the base of the product. This is followed by cane sugar, which is just simply regular sugar. And the thing to keep in mind here is that depending on the variety that you pick, so if you pick the original product, which a lot of people end up doing, it does usually have added sugar, but you can also purchase unsweetened varieties, so it won't have the added sugar and this ingredient won't be in it. Then we see that it has an added vitamin and mineral blend. Now, here's the truth about plant-based milks that not everybody mentions. They are usually often low in naturally occurring nutrients. So a lot of the time, companies will re-add vitamins and minerals to increase the nutrient content of the beverage. So in this product, we see that it has added vitamin A, vitamin D, B2, and B12. Now, just a note on the vitamin D, because this is important, the most bioavailable form of vitamin D is known as vitamin D3. And that just simply means that it is the best absorbed and utilized in the body. Now, this product uses vitamin D2, and the reason why is because vitamin D3 is often animal derived. So in order to make this a completely plant-based beverage, they have to use vitamin D too. So technically I would argue they are using a lower quality vitamin D here. It's not the end of the world, but just something I thought I should mention. So you may be wondering, why are they adding these specific nutrients? And the reason why is because they are most often found in cow's milk. So if you are using this as an alternative to cow's milk, the goal is to make sure you're still getting some of the nutrients that you would be from the cow's milk and you're getting it now in the plant-based milk. So to compare soy milk to a cow's milk, I'm going to use the nutrition label from Nutrell. This is just a Canadian milk company. There are tons of them out there, but because milk is milk, the nutritional composition shouldn't really change much or at all. So if we compare the nutrition labels, we see that cow's milk has naturally occurring vitamin B12. It has a variety of other B vitamins, it has calcium, and then a variety of other minerals as well. We also see that it has 9 grams of protein per cup, so very similar to the soy milk, just a little bit higher. If you look at the ingredient list, you'll notice it has 3 ingredients. Obviously milk, vitamin A, and vitamin D3. And the reason why vitamin A and vitamin D are added to cow's milk is simply because of the skimming process. So vitamin A and vitamin D are both fat-soluble vitamins. So when you do any type of skimming on milk, so whether it's a 2% milk, 1%, or skim milk, you are removing some of the fat. When you remove the fat, you are also removing these fat-soluble vitamins. Now this does depend on where you are located in the world. I am located in Canada, and it is mandatory for them to re-add vitamin A and vitamin D into any type of skimmed milk. In the US, it is not mandatory, but a lot of companies still do it. Now in Canada right now, cow's milk has to have at least 13% the daily value of vitamin D. However, by the end of 2025, this is going to go up to 25% the daily value of vitamin D. And the reason why is because a lot of Canadians are deficient in vitamin D. There aren't a ton of food sources, and depending on where you're located in Canada, you may not have a ton of sun exposure, especially year round. Okay, so now let's go back to comparing the two labels. So obviously, if we are going to compare the soy milk to the cow's milk, we do see that the cow's milk has a much simpler label. You will notice that the cow's milk has 13 grams of sugar. However, here's the thing, those 13 grams of sugar are not added sugar. That is naturally occurring sugar in the form of lactose. Now, you may have heard of lactose before. This is a naturally occurring milk sugar, so it naturally exists within milk, and it's not the equivalent of adding something like cane sugar to the product. The one issue with Canada is that we don't actually differentiate between added sugar and naturally occurring sugar on our nutrient label. In the United States, I believe they do separate this, so that is nice for you guys if you are in the States. In Canada, it is not separated, so the only way you can figure it out is by going to the ingredient list. If you don't see added sugars, then you can obviously assume that it is naturally occurring. If you do see sugar in the ingredient list, then obviously part of that, or if not all of it, is added sugar. I know it can be confusing, but it is what it is. But when we are comparing these two products, we do see that the Silk soy milk does have additional ingredients such as gums and flavorings. Again, I do want to emphasize that you can buy unsweetened and unflavored soy milk, but it is more common, especially the more commercialized ones that a lot of people purchase. They tend to have gums and usually some form of flavoring in it, but again, you can find other ones. Now, the reason why a lot of plant-based milks do contain gums is because it helps to improve the consistency of the product. If you have ever tried to make an at-home plant-based milk, you may notice that it's a little gritty, the texture's not the same, it's not as smooth, and the reason for this is because you're really just taking, let's say, soybeans and mixing it with water and hoping that it's going to have this nice smooth consistency. So for companies, they want to make sure that people are going to buy their products and enjoy them. So oftentimes they will add gums and other thickeners to, again, improve the consistency and stabilize the product. And so this is why they're commonly found in plant-based milks. With that being said, there are some people who choose to avoid gums or at least limit them due to personal reasons and maybe personal health concerns. I will say at this point in time, any gums that you do find in these commercial products are recognized as safe by most health authorities. And you would need to consume a lot of these to even potentially pose any risk. That being said, people have the right to have their own personal concerns, and I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should be consuming gums. That's for you to decide. If it is the case that you do want to avoid plant-based milks that do contain gums as well as other flavorings, then you're just going to have to investigate a little bit to find a product that's right for you. They do exist, they're just not as common. I did find online a company that has a very simple ingredient list for their soy milk, which is by Westlife. To be honest, I've never heard of the company until I started doing a little bit of research into this, but they do have a pretty simple ingredient list. If anyone has any other examples of companies that have really simple ingredient lists for soy milk, let us know in the comments so people can be aware of them. So if we take a quick look at their ingredient list, we see that per cup it has 9 grams of protein, so this is awesome. It also doesn't have any added sugars or really any other added ingredients. But just keep in mind, because they don't add anything extra, if you notice on the nutrient label, the vitamin and mineral content is very low. So it depends on what you want to do with this product. If you're you're really trying to rely on it as a really high nutrition source, I probably would argue it's not the best option. If you're just trying to get some protein or to have it as an alternative to cow's milk, then this definitely could be an option. Okay, so now that we have covered high protein plant-based milks, let's talk about some other ones. One really popular one is almond milk. Now, almond milk is very, very popular, but one very large issue is that it is extremely low in protein. Now, if you are just looking for a plant-based milk that you can add as an alternative to cow's milk, let's say you're adding it to a smoothie, or you're adding it to a coffee, or you're adding it maybe to cereal, and you don't really care about the protein content, then it certainly can be an option. But if you are focused on protein, almond milk is not the best option for you. Now, again, for consistency, I'm going to use Silk almond milk as an example, but I will provide other alternatives in a few moments. Now, for this one, I'm going to use an unsweetened option to highlight the fact that, again, you can buy unsweetened, sugar-free alternatives. For this one, it is flavored with vanilla though. So if we take a look at the nutrition label, we see that it has virtually no fat, no sugar, and only 1 gram of protein. So this is very, very low. We also see in the ingredient list that it basically only contains a vitamin and mineral blend, and this provides calcium, vitamin E, vitamin A, and vitamin D. We also see on the ingredient list that it has 1 to 3 types of oils, I guess depending on the batch and what's available, but they do have at least 1 to 3 different types. And from the label, we see that it has 3 grams of fat, so this is where the fat is coming from. I would argue that this is likely to add richness and texture to the product. If you just have pure water, from a mouthfeel perspective, it's not going to be very smooth and very enjoyable. So a lot of the times companies will have to add an alternative ingredient because cow's milk is high in fat, so it has that smoothness. So they will add alternative fats to compensate for this. So I just want to point out that for most commercial milks, they're not just water and then the main ingredients. So for example, almonds, oftentimes they will add additional ingredients. However, I will show a few examples in a second where they are more simplified. We also see that this one does contain gums, again, to improve the consistency of the product, and this is to be expected for most traditional almond milks. You'll also notice that it has ascorbic acid or vitamin C, and this is just to help preserve the product quality. Now, of course, I do want to provide an alternative example because I do want to make sure that I highlight the ones that most people use, but also if you do decide to have a more simple ingredient list, that there are options available. So this example is from Calafia Farms, and the ingredient list is very, very basic. Really, from this one, we see that it contains water, almonds, vanilla extract, and a little bit of sea salt. So if you're a type of person who wants to minimize any added ingredients like added oils and gums, again, I'm not saying they're bad for you, and I'm not saying that they're the best thing ever. I'm just saying they are an ingredient that are commonly found in plant-based milks. If you want to avoid them for whatever reason, then this is probably going to be a better option for you. Another really popular example is milk. And again, we see a very simple ingredient list here. Like I've already mentioned, when you have these really simple ingredient lists, yes, they are simple in ingredients, but they're going to be pretty devoid of nutrition. So as we can see on the nutrient label, there's virtually no protein, there's virtually no fats, and the vitamin and mineral content is almost non-existent. So personally, I would not rely on this as an optimal source of nutrition. I would use it as an alternative to cow's milk for more functional reasons. So for example, using it again in cereals, coffee, or even a smoothie. And then next we have cashew milk. For this one, I'm going to be using Silk again, but for this one, it's going to be unsweetened and unflavored. If we take a look at the ingredient list, it is very similar to the almond milk that we just talked about. One thing to particularly note though, is it's actually a mixture of cashews and almonds. It doesn't have any of the oils that were found in the almond milk, but it does have some gums again for that product consistency. If we're going to compare the nutrient content to cow's milk, I would argue they're not really comparable at all, especially because it is very, very low in protein and the fat content is very low as well. Because this is an unsweetened product, it doesn't have any added sugar, so that is a bonus. Now, some people really do like cashew milk because it's a bit creamier compared to other plant-based milks such as almond milk. And from a nutrition perspective, I don't think it's the best option, but it can be an alternative for other reasons. Then we have another really popular up-and-coming plant-based milk, which is oat milk. So with oat milk, it's very popular right now because it has a much better creamy consistency, which a lot of people are looking for. If you use something like soy milk or almond milk, they don't have the same level of creaminess that you would want, especially if you're trying to replace cow's milk. Now, I do want to point out a couple things about oat milk that you probably don't know. First of all, it is obviously low in protein. Again, soy milk is the only plant-based milk that's actually high in protein. This oat milk is not high in protein. But I do want to draw your attention to 2 two main things. First of all, if we take a look at the sugar content, we see that it has 7 grams of added sugar. But if we go down to the ingredient list, we don't see cane sugar, for example, as a main ingredient. So you may be wondering, where is the added sugar even coming from? And it's actually coming from the oat concentrate. So most oat milks are commonly made by adding water to oat concentrate. And an oat concentrate is simply a combination of water and oats. They are mixed together really, really well. And then it is dehydrated to concentrate the oat sugars. And then when they want to make oat milk, they just re-add the water. The second thing that it contains is sunflower oil. And the reason why they add this is for the creaminess of the product. Now, if we use a different brand such as Califia oat milk, we see that it has a much simpler ingredient list. It only has water, oats, and sea salt. So for sure, you can definitely get brands that make more simplified oat milk. The issue with this is that I guarantee it's not going to have the same level of creaminess that the other oat milks will have. And the simple reason is because the fat content is pretty low. Now, the same brand did come out with a creamy version, so an alternative to the basic one, but it does add sunflower oil to make it creamy. And the thing about plant-based milks is that if you are trying to use it as an alternative to cow's milk for its functional properties, you have to keep these things in mind, and that's what companies are doing. So for example, cow's milk froths really, really well, and it's partly because of the protein content, but also the fat content. And so as a result, it's going to be a lot creamier because of this. Now, because plant-based milks are naturally really low in these ingredients, companies are going to have to add other ingredients to compensate for this. So if you're talking about, for example, creaminess, oftentimes you will see that they add gums or other type of thickeners or emulsifiers, and then they may also add different types of oils to it because you need to add the fat in some way. Of course, if you can take anything from this video, it really just depends on the purpose of the product and why you are using it. If you're not using it for creaminess, then it doesn't really matter and you can use a more simplified ingredient list. If you're trying to get a more creamy oat milk, then this is something to consider. If you are at a coffee shop, then it is most likely that they're going to use an oat milk that has that creaminess to it. And again, this is simply because if you're at a coffee shop, they want you to enjoy the product, so they're going to use an oat milk that gives that creaminess that you're looking for. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that it's good or bad. I just want you to be informed and make your own decisions and decide which one is right for you, and in particular, if it's going to suit the function that you're looking for. Now, there are a lot of other plant-based milks out there. I don't want to be here all day, so I'll just talk about 2 really quickly. Coconut milk is very, very popular because it is high in saturated fat, so it's going to be very, very creamy. And it will have similar functional properties to cow's milk in at least that regard. The issue with coconut milk, though, is it tastes like coconut. Rice milk is another one, but I would argue that rice milk is pretty empty in terms of nutrition. It doesn't have a lot in it, and it tends to be quite watery. Okay, so based on this, which one is the most nutritious? If we are going to decide a winner in terms of nutrition when comparing it to cow's milk, I would say soy milk is going to be your best option. And simply put, it's because of the higher protein content. Technically speaking, I know not everyone's going to want to hear this, but if we are going solely based on nutrition and the actual nutrient composition of the product, I would argue that technically speaking, traditional cow's milk is the most nutritious. But if you want a plant-based option, I would say soy milk is the next best option. Okay, so now let's dive into the pros and cons of plant-based milks. So let's first talk about some pros of consuming plant-based milks. First and foremost, it is a good option for people who are vegan or choose to avoid cow's milk for whatever reason. Obviously, there are people that choose to not consume animal-based products, so it is awesome that there are a variety of plant-based alternatives for them. The second thing is that it is an alternative for people who have dairy allergies or sensitivities. Cow's milk falls under the top 8 food allergens, so it is important that we have alternatives for people who are allergic to milk proteins. On top of this, there are people who are sensitive to lactose, which is that milk sugar we talked about, and they may have lactose intolerance. The third reason is simply the taste. I'll be honest, I can't stand the taste of cow's milk by itself. I only add cow's milk to my coffee as well as my cereal. And you will not find me being that person that's going to sit there and pour a cup of cow's milk and just drink it. I really don't enjoy the taste. But I do have family members that really do enjoy cow's milk, and I also have family members that do not drink cow's milk at all, and they do consume the plant-based milks. So clearly, even within a family, there's a lot of individual preferences. So now let's talk about some cons of plant-based milks. The first thing is that I would argue they are nutritionally inferior to cow's milk in almost all cases. Cow's milk is naturally high in protein. It's also naturally high in a lot of vitamins and minerals. And there's really no added ingredients except for vitamin A and vitamin D. With plant-based milks, they tend to be a lot lower in nutrition. A lot of companies will re-add vitamins and minerals to increase it, but naturally speaking, they are pretty low. The second thing that not a lot of people consider is that people with nut or soy allergies may not be able to have plant-based milks. Soy and nuts also fall fall under the top 8 food allergens. So for those people that are allergic to nuts or soy, they need to be very, very careful with plant-based milks. And so for them, maybe cow's milk is the only option for them. And this is why having options is important for everybody. The third thing is that they oftentimes contain a lot of added ingredients. While all of the added ingredients are currently recognized as safe, some people do want to have a more simplified ingredient list and try to avoid any additional ingredients. And that's totally up to them. If that is you, just keep in mind that some plant-based milks will have additional ingredients such as added oils, gums, flavorings, added sugars, and so on. The fourth downside is that they don't always have the same functional properties. One downside of plant-based milks is that they don't necessarily have the same functional properties as cow's milk. So for example, their frothing abilities, their browning effect, especially in baking, and so on. Companies are starting to get a lot better at creating plant-based beverages that have similar functional properties to cow's milk, but with that comes some of the added ingredients such as those oils or those gums to improve the functionality of the product. So this is why I don't like saying that the ingredients are good or bad, because they have a purpose if you want them, but you can also choose to avoid them if that's your wish. And the fifth thing is that they oftentimes do waste a lot of water. One of the biggest arguments against plant-based milks is that you're really adding a ton of water to something that is dry in order to make it a milk. We have to remember that the main ingredient in all of these plant-based milks are naturally dry. Soybeans, almonds, cashews, oats, they're dried products. So in order to make them a liquid and a milk, they have to add a ton of water. And so some people do argue it is awfully wasteful. Okay, so how do you pick the right milk for you? Whether you choose to consume cow's milk or plant-based milk, that is a decision that you have to make for yourself, and I'm not going to tell you which one is right for you. What I will say is the best thing you can do is determine what you're using them for. If you're using it for nutrition, I would opt for a cow's milk or a soy milk. If you are using it for frothing, I would use cow's milk, oat milk, or coconut milk. If you're adding it to a cereal or a smoothie and you don't really care about the nutritional properties of it, then you can pretty much use whichever plant-based milk or cow's milk that you want. If you are really focused on choosing something that has a really simple ingredient list or is more natural, I would definitely opt for a cow's milk, or opting for a plant-based beverage that has a very simple ingredient list. At the end of the day, it just depends on what you want from it. And I really think that we need to get away from the war against cow's milk versus plant-based milks, because at the end of the day, everyone has their own unique needs and they want different things out of the product. And so it's not for us to just sit there and tell you that one is really bad and one is really not bad, because it is really dependent on what the person wants to do with it. And you don't have to have one or the other. You can enjoy both. There's no law against you having cow's milk and plant-based milks. And personally, I don't really care which one you pick as long as it's based on your unique needs. And with that, I hope you found this video helpful. If there are any other products or topics you want me to cover, just let me know in the comments below. And if you did find this video helpful, I would love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel so I can reach more people like you. And I'll see you in the next video.